All right, everyone, let's get started. It is 3:10. Last session of the day. You made it. Hopefully, this will be a good end to your day. So let's just talk about briefly how this will work today. I'll do some quick introductions for the three of us that you see on screen. And then, we're going to share talking between the three of us. We'll talk to you about kind of what is the philosophy of service learning if you're brand new to it. And then we'll talk to you about, we'll show you a service learning project, one that does not so much focus on a social justice or with a social justice lens, and then how to frame that in using a social justice lens. After that, we'll do a really brief, easy activity so you can start to think about how this could look in your own class. And then after that, we'll wrap it up with next steps of how you get more deeply involved if you're interested. So I'll just start by introducing the presentation. As you can see, it's called Critical Service Learning, Social Justice in Our Classrooms and Community. My name is Annie Cizik. I teach in the English department, and I'm also a co-assistant director for the Service Learning Faculty Institute, an office on campus. And I'll let Betty introduce herself now.
Hi, I'm Betty Habershon, and I am the Service Learning Director and have had the privilege of working with Nikki and Annie over the past couple of years now, first as faculty fellows in the Service Learning Institute, and subsequently they manage the advisory team also for service learning. So, and I'll pass it on to Nikki.
Hi, I'm Nikki Bishop. Like Annie, I also teach in the English department, and I am the co-assistant director of the service learning program here on campus.
Okay, great. So now I'm going to jump to our next slide, and Betty is going to explain to you briefly about what is service learning. So Betty, go right ahead.
Okay, well, service learning in the simplest terms is combining volunteer service with community action. We need to think of it as doing real things in our community to address the real needs of our community. And it's important to look at this graphic here where it has academic material, because service learning is not just volunteering, it is about teaching and learning. It's a teaching methodology where our students learn through service. So that has to be a strong point of service learning. It has to have service that's relevant to the community and has real purpose of the community. And then it also has to have a reflection piece. This is where we connect the learning to the community needs, and the student actually understands about why they're doing something and why it is needed in the community. And this is where you really can strengthen later when we talk about the social justice component of service learning, because it's not just doing good stuff in the community, but it's needed work that can hopefully make change in our community. Internships focus on the student more, about getting a skill. Volunteerism is focusing entirely on the community, but not focusing on learning. Service learning combines them, where we're having the student learn through their service. Next slide, Annie. Next slide. Okay, and the components, as I had mentioned, we're talking about real learning outcomes. As you integrate service learning into your course, it actually has to address learning outcomes that exist in your course. It's just another methodology for the student to learn. It's not putting something on top of what you do in your course. It's another mechanism that the student can learn. It has to address real community needs. So you have to involve the community to make sure you are addressing needs of the community and not imposing some activity upon the community. And the reflection is so important. It's where you will allow the student to make that connection And I should also mention, before you do a service learning project, you should also prepare your students by letting them understand the community, understanding the needs that exist in that community, so that they have some basis that they are going to be serving, that they can have a basis to reflect upon. But that reflection piece is so important because that's where the real learning takes place. We always note that we put a hyphen, at least at our college, we say service hyphen learning. And many times in this profession, it's said the hyphen is the reflection. It's connecting the service to the learning, just to remind you. And next. Okay, and we talk about especially, we would like to have critical service learning. I always say you can have light service learning and deep service learning, and we would really like to move toward deep service learning, which is critical service learning. It emphasizes the social justice component. The student should understand what is happening in the community, what is happening with the community members that they are working with, and the organizations that are they involved with. Why is there a need for whatever service that they are providing? And they should hopefully be able to understand long-term, or begin to think long-term, how will the community change based on what my service is, what I'm doing? How will it help make change in the community? It involves thinking about all of the components, the community, the organization, the person, the experience that the students are being involved in. All of this should be considered by the student, and they do that through reflection. Now, you as the faculty member will help determine what is the means of the reflection. How will the student reflect? And it has to be appropriate for your discipline, but it will still serve the purpose of widening the student's horizon of understanding the community issues. It will also hopefully make our students be stronger citizens who are committed to social justice beyond just participating in this one activity. Whether it's your activity is a one-time or throughout the semester, we hope we are doing life-changing activities for the students so that they will see this as a long-term component of their life. Okay.
Okay, to help explain this concept a little bit more, we're going to share with you a sample project. And this is a real project that I did in my class. And I'm going to walk you through how I did the project. And we'll look at how I could have made it more oriented towards social justice. So some reflective practices that I could have incorporated. So the course that I implemented this project in is English 1340. I've given you kind of a pared down version of the learning outcomes so that you can see what the class actually involves. So we focus a lot on audience needs and audience considerations in writing and designing documents, definitions, technical information, preparing things like memos, and of course using sources. It is an English class. So with this project, what I did the first time that I implemented it into the online version of my course is I worked with an organization called Community Forklift. So Annie, next slide. Thank you. So Community Forklift is a community organization that has really two community needs that it meets. One is construction waste. It's a nonprofit reuse warehouse for home improvement items, salvage, etc. So the concept of Community Forklift is if you're renovating your house and you have a bunch of supplies from that renovation, maybe cabinets, flooring, all of that, you can actually donate it to Community Forklift. So one community need that they serve is a place to recycle these sorts of materials. Another community need that they serve is if people need free or low cost supplies for their own home renovations, especially after events like a flood or a fire where insurance didn't cover everything. They serve that community need as well. So I was really interested in working with this community partner because I thought that they served two really important community needs that I thought would engage my students. And I thought that based on our course outcomes, we could help this community partner. So what we did, I worked with the community partner, and we decided that what would be immediately helpful for my online class to do would be to create something called infographics that they could display on their website, on their blog, on their social media, and that they could print and put around the actual physical warehouse for people on terms such as construction waste, what a nonprofit is. They said that a lot of their clients were really confused about what makes them a nonprofit, because people still had to buy things from Community Forklift. And there were some other terms that they knew that infographics would really help people visiting the warehouse or visiting the website better understand what Community Forklift is and how it serves the community. So that's what we did. And on the next slide, I actually have some samples for you just so that you can see what that meant. So these are actual infographics that students in my course made and that Community Forklift has featured. And every student worked with a slightly different concept. These are just a couple of samples so you can see what we did. So as you can see, these are really nice. They don't necessarily look like students made them. So Community Forklift loved these. They did end up using them in some of their materials, such as their blog, their website. The electronic pieces were really where they used them. But an area that I know this project could be strengthened in, and what we're focusing on for this presentation, is I could have incorporated social justice a little bit more. So the next slide will show you the questions that I asked students to reflect on and where I could have strengthened the social justice component and made it a more critical project. So I really had my students think about how the project helped them better understand infographics, which is a concept that we talk about in class, how writing for a specific audience impacted their ability to produce the infographic. It enhanced their understanding of audience awareness, and how serving a community need engaged them. And all of these questions were very important because they helped me gauge student learning in relation to our immediate course outcomes. But I could and should, next time I implement a project like this, take it a step further by thinking a little bit more about how I could get students thinking about social justice. We did a couple small discussion board activities where we talked about Community Forklift, who they serve, but we really looked at those things from the lens of how will you incorporate audience analysis into your project, because audience analysis is a huge outcome for the course. But I could have incorporated more reflective questions, looking more at the groups of people Community Forklift serves and why that need exists, and whether students can consider themselves within or outside of that group. And there are multiple groups that Community Forklift serves, so we could have explored those more. But really exploring what needs to happen beyond this individual project that we did, which is impactful, but it's sort of like a Band-Aid. It's serving an immediate need, but what needs to be done to really address the needs that exist in the first place. So we could extend this to beyond this small project, and we could do more work investigating the problem. And there are other ways that I can incorporate that into my class based on my course outcomes. But you can kind of see the comparison on one side, the less critical reflective questions, which are effective for student learning related to the outcomes. But then I could also include more of these critical questions that would really encourage my students to think from the lens of social justice, and how could we work as a community to make it where we have fewer people with the needs that we're serving through the organization. Okay.
All right, so on that note, we are going to take everything Nikki and Betty just talked about and do hopefully a really easy activity to help you start to think about how this could look in your class. And then if you're interested to take this to the next level, Betty is going to talk about at the end of the presentation how to join the Service Learning Faculty Institute to really, like I said, take it to the next level. So here is the activity. Let me just pull up. Here we go. All right. All right, so yes, okay. So if you guys could just brainstorm, if you want to write it down, if you want to type, whatever works for you today. I've broken up our thinking into two separate parts. So here's the first part. When we're thinking about service learning, we always need to think about the community. What does the community need, right? And then after we identify that, then we connect it to a class or our class outcomes and talk about ways that those can be combined. So let's first, just as a group, identify some community needs. Now, I said underneath, community can be defined in many ways, but for the purpose of this activity, let's narrow our scope to campus, county, and state. So in the chat box, if you could just off the top of your head, identify some community needs on campus, in the county, or in the state. Feel free to start typing. I gave you an example of a community need. It's just my opinion. More resources for K-12 public ed students, meaning money, teachers, support. So if you guys could give me just a couple ideas in the chat box, I'll just give you a second. Nikki and Betty can contribute too if they want. Thanks, Laura. Technology access, good. Good. That's a good one. Thank you, Laura. Cherry said food, heat, electrical, rent needs. Good. Okay, you guys are coming up with some good ones. Let me go up. More interaction with public safety. Thanks, Ron. Beth said more resources specifically for help with online learning, tutoring for families while we are still doing virtual learning. So true. Nicole says virtual mental health services. Yes. Cyrus says career and financial advising. Yeah, that definitely falls into number one. Absolutely. So yeah, these are great community needs, and I think they all fit within the scope that we're talking about. I typed a few on the screen, but we all have access to the chat, so really that could be our list as well. So let's take that list and talk about the second and last step of our activity today. So this one's a little bit more comprehensive. So what I want you to do is this, and I'll give you an example. So to make the connection between a community need and then critical service learning, I want you to select one class you teach and then one outcome or maybe a collection of outcomes from that class off the top of your head that could connect to a community need, maybe already listed or maybe one we haven't talked about. After you do that, the next thing is to connect that class and the outcomes to the critical and reflection guided questions below. And those guided questions are the ones that Nikki previously talked about in terms of how to take her service learning project to the next level and incorporate more social justice components. So these are just really those same questions. But to give you an example of what I mean, I did this for myself. For a class that I teach, and then I'll have you jot down your ideas for a class that you teach. So the class that I chose is English 1010 because I teach a lot of those sections happily. And I just combined and I said, all English 1010 outcomes prepare students to write college level research essays. So that's the class, and I really just summarized all of the outcomes together. The community need that I picked is, I thought the community needed college level writing prep in underserved public schools, obviously to help public school students, you know, get into college more easily. So the next question is briefly explain or brainstorm that connection using these 4 questions. So the first question is, what community need is being addressed? That's pretty clear at this point. Underserved K-12 public students in the community. The second question is, what groups of people does this community need serve? And why is there a need to serve these groups of people? Do you consider yourself a part of any of these groups? That's really 3 questions. I get that. So I answered, I italicized the one that I answered, and you can choose to answer 1 or more. I answered, why is there a need to serve these groups of people? And I said, inequalities and opportunity for students create this need. Number 3 asks, what inequities, social, economical, etc., does this community need highlight? And I said, one of the inequities or inequalities this community need highlights is the unfair distribution of wealth, example, property taxes, when funding public schools. So I think that that's, of course, something that this highlights, that all public schools are not funded equally. And then number 4, what other supports or resources are needed to help meet these community needs? Who could this help, and how could you become involved beyond this class? So again, that's 3 questions in one, and I italicized the one I answered. How could you become more involved beyond this class? And I said students could continue to serve K-12 students after the class is over in some capacity. So that's what the example looks like. And I'll go back up to my example, but I'd like you guys to just do this on your own. Just take a minute or two, you know, identify your class, 1 or more of the outcomes, a community need, and then make that connection with these questions. I'm going to give you a minute or 2 to get this done, and then I'm hopeful that 1 or 2 of you will get on the mic and tell us what you have. So
So
I'll go
Annie,
back.
they're not putting that in the chat. They're just jotting that on some paper they may have,
Right.
and then
Yep.
we'll
If
be
you could just,
sharing afterwards.
yeah, exactly. Write it down on your own somewhere, and then we'll have you get on the mic, a couple of you, and talk about your answers. So I'll put up the example, and I'll let you do that work.
And it is a lot to think about. So if you'd like an area to focus on, maybe think about how, what outcomes you think in your class kind of match a community need first.
When you get this done and you'd like to share, you can raise your hand or unmute or type and say you want to talk. Give you like 30 more seconds, and then wherever you are, we can just talk through your issues. Yeah. Sherry, do you want to get on, unmute yourself and talk us through your answers?
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Hi.
No, not okay for that. I don't feel very well, so
Oh, got you.
I
Okay.
want to listen. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Does anyone else want to unmute themselves and we can talk through your answers? No takers.
This is Annette Savoy. I'll go ahead. I haven't completed my
Sure.
responses, but I can just kind of talk it through with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, that would be so perfect. Go right ahead. Thanks, Annette. So you can
Okay.
start with the class that you chose.
Com 1130 interviewing.
Okay.
And the reason that I chose this class is number one, Laura Miller, who's in this workshop, and I are going to be actually creating an OER for this course.
Oh, great.
And one of the things that is near and dear to my heart when I think about the Prince George's County public school system, especially grades 9 through 12, the issue of our students really not being equipped enough to understand the communication skills you need to go into an interview and be successful.
Okay, that's great. That's a really clear community need. Perfect.
And so my thought around the service piece
Mhm.
is, and okay, let me go to the next question. So that question was the community need, right?
Yep. And then you can just go into the 4 critical reflection questions now.
Okay.
And it sounds like you already answered number 1. So what community need is being addressed? So you can really hop into number 2.
Okay, and the inequality. So it kind of ties in with number 2, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The inequalities that I'm seeing is the opportunity for students to learn interviewing skills. And one thing that stands out for me is as I'm teaching communication, they really around interviewing in my foundations of communications classes, they don't really understand that the nonverbal communication speak volumes during an interview. And that includes your attire. And so one of the things that I'm noticing is the younger generation, they don't understand that you can't just wear some ripped up jeans and a t-shirt and go into an interview and expect for the interviewer to really look at you as a professional. They may be able to get away with that sometimes, but not all the time. And the idea that I have is to help them understand that you have to have a wardrobe that have more than just some sneakers, some jeans, and a t-shirt. And that's one of the things that really stand out for me. And so that piece of it, I would like to really flush out during this type of public service that I think needs to exist.
Okay, great.
And I hope I'm going in the right direction here.
No, you are. I think we're on number 3. What you're saying makes total sense. So what inequities does this community need highlight?
Right. One of the inequities of the community highlights is unfair distribution of wealth. And so when I think about the unfair distribution of funding and things like that, there are some students who really don't have the money to go out and purchase maybe business casual attire, business attire. And that's one of the things that I think needs to be addressed. What can we do? What can we put in to help these students get the clothing that they need from head to toe, so that when they go into an interview, they'll look professional, feel professional. And I always tell my students, sometimes when you put on a suit, you want to talk more proper. You want to stand up straighter. You want to speak clearer, etc. And so that stood out for me. But sometimes they don't have the money or the resources to get those clothing items.
Great. Yeah, that's great. And then, yeah, lastly, just talk to us about what other resources do you think are needed to meet these community needs?
I think one of the things is perhaps, and I know we probably have some resources at the college to help students get the clothing necessary to go in and feel professional, but to have more opportunities for them to come in picked from a set of suits or a set of pair of shoes, etc., so that they won't feel that they have to go to a department store and spend hundreds of dollars on an outfit just for an interview, that we will provide that for them, and or reach out to the community malls and say, what do you have any clothes that you would like to donate to this cause, things like that. So
Yeah. Thank you, Annette. These are like really good ideas. I really appreciate it for just being brave and talking us through your ideas. And this process is the same process that you would go through and you would think through if you decided to create a project for your own class. And this is, a piece of that process, but a really important piece that Nikki said that she wished she could have done better with in the past. And I do also wish I would have done a better job using more of a social justice lens in my projects as well. So moving forward, hopefully, we all will be able to use this lens even more. But thank you, Annette. And on that note, I'm going to let Betty wrap it up with next steps and questions for the Institute. So let me click over to our...
Great. And Annie, as you're going over to our next slide, I wanted to really commend Annette for her concept. I mean, that was just a great concept and a great project. And also, it lets you know you don't have to do it all yourself. When you were saying, well, the students have the needs of clothes, you don't have to go out and create a clothing program. You can connect with other nonprofits in our community that are looking to help young adults in our community. So and that's where our Service Learning Office wants to do a stronger job of helping make connections with nonprofit organizations. So I think that was a great project, and it leads well to discussing our Service Learning Faculty Institute. Our Service Learning Faculty Institute is a formal process that faculty can apply for, and that's both full-time and adjunct faculty. Many of you should have seen the application came out this fall, actually a couple of times, and it was encouraged through deans and chairs. Where you will formally develop an integration of service learning into your actual course that you will be teaching hopefully the next semester. That's why the chairs and the deans have to be supportive of this and sign off on your application. You will actually go through the steps of understanding service learning, understanding working with community. You will take that idea, for example, like Annette just had, and she will dig deeper into fleshing out an actual service learning project. She'll think about all the pros and cons and barriers. She'll make sure, as Nikki and Annie has said, making it a strong critical service learning project that focuses on our social justice lens, looks at it from a social justice lens. We try to have strong service learning projects, but I will say, as Annie and Nikki both said, their projects grew. They didn't just start off with this very strong critical service learning project, but they started off with a project that had the foundation of service learning. And that's what we ask. You don't have to pause and wait until you get it 100% right or strong, but each time you develop it, each time you implement it, it will get stronger and stronger. But what we do want you to do is think through all the components, and that's what the Service Learning Institute does. Initially, this was a physical workshop approach, and I've been directing this for quite a while, and I'll say it was really difficult for both myself and faculty because it was hard for us to get together. We're all very busy, but what we have done now as a suggestion, advice from our service learning advisory team, was to now make it an online independent program. So the Institute is entirely online. It is moved, like you move through it independently. I am there to support you. I will be meeting with you both in the beginning and in the end. In fact, that's what we're at right now, is beginning to have those faculty meetings to make sure everyone is moving in the right direction. And then you will be able to work over up, and it takes at least, I would say, 2 months, a month and a half to really work a semester to develop that project. And it will be available in the spring. You will be able to, in fact, we probably, I haven't told Annie and Nikki this, we'll probably be putting that application out at the end of the fall so that people can give thought and be ready to apply and jump right into the program in the spring. And that way they will develop it for either a summer course, which it could if you wanted, or it could be a fall course. Fall would give you a lot more time to work through the project itself. There is a stipend, and this stipend is a one-time stipend that our vice president has supported. And it is for the development of that first, the learning and development. It is not for every time you do a service learning project. It is really because you're putting out this effort to take time and learn this new teaching methodology and integrate it into your first course. So I hope that you will all be really, we've got great support from our English department. And I know Paul is here. I know we've got great support from English and the humanities, which I think is speech is still humanities, right? So we have someone from there. We have a business instructor. Service learning can be integrated into almost any course. So please don't go, oh, that's not for me. You may have to think a little harder for how you will integrate it, but that's what we all do. And I should have mentioned, I'm also faculty. I didn't mention that. I'm an accounting faculty. I've been teaching accounting for over 30 some years, but my real heart is in community. Nikki and Annie, they were prior fellows through the Service Learning Institute. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close up? Because I know we're getting to our final.
So I would definitely add that if you were looking at the questions Annie put up in the activity, and it seemed like a big leap getting from step one to answering the reflective questions, you don't have to go into the Institute with your project planned. And I think that some people may feel a little bit intimidated by the process, but everything that Betty goes through in the Institute will take you from your class outcomes to looking more closely at them, thinking about community needs. So really what we asked you to do today is something that should take you a lot longer. We were just kind of introducing you to it. So don't be intimidated if you just have a class that you would like to find a way to incorporate service learning into it. I suggest considering signing up for the Institute.
And are there any
when is the next time? When is the next time you have a opening for the Institute? Has it already started?
It has started for the spring. I mean, for the fall Institute, that will be spring implementation. But we will be putting out this fall another application period for people to start as soon as we come back in the spring to develop. Because you have to give yourself adequate time to truly develop a strong service learning program, a project integrated in your course. We don't want you to rush through it.
Yes, I understand. Thank you.
So please look out for those. Did you get the application? Is this Annette?
It is. It's Annette Savoy.
Yeah, if you got
if it did come to me, I don't believe, I can't say that I didn't get it. Perhaps I didn't pay enough attention. to be honest with you, but it's definitely something that's near and dear to my heart, especially as I'm teaching my classes more and more. This interviewing thing is just, in some cases, it's really out of control, and it's kind of sad that we don't have students that are really ready to go in and interview well, verbally or non-verbally. And so when I do see the application again, I'll be sure and apply.
Great. And what I'll do, I think, Annie and Nikki, we're going to get a list of people that are attending this session, and we'll make sure we send you the application just so you can preview it. It's very simple. It's not something you need to take a long period to complete.
Thank you.
And it does look like we're at the end of our time. So does anyone else have any last questions for us before we end this? All right. Well, if not, thank you so much, everyone. We appreciate you just listening and learning and being open to some new ideas.
Thank
Great.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all.
I like that. It's different.